Well, it's an honor to have this gentleman on the show. You know, we like to have the best of the best on the program. And when we talk college football, we bring in the people who understand the game. We could put anybody on, but today we want Paul Finebaum on because he and I are, not because we're on the same wavelength when it comes to the Big Ten commissioner and what's going on in college football. But, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate the time today, sir.
Cody, it is an absolute honor. Thank you for having me.
Now, you and I are in the same wavelength. Again, I don't know the commissioner. I don't know, I don't know Kevin Warren. I don't know what's going on in the Big Ten. But obviously, here in Pennsylvania where I live, you got Penn State fans not knowing what's going on. There's been so much said. And yet, what is going on? Why does he not listen to the players? Because, the whole thing is about in a world of democracy, you want to make sure you hear all sides involved. Why does he not even want to revisit what's going on in his conference with a lot of the schools that want to play?
Tony, I think the reason is simple. They made up their mind, including him, months ago that they were not going to play, and then they had to figure out a way to act like they were. But the key was on July 9th when Kevin Warren broke with everyone else in college football and announced we're only going to play conference games. That really did not go over well because he had been at a meeting that morning on Zoom with the other four commissioners, and they were still talking about being collaborative. After that, he went through the motions and, in many ways, fraudulently announcing 6 days before they canceled that they were the schedule. Give everybody 6 days of red meat to get excited, see the Ohio State-Michigan game early, look at Penn State's schedule, see where they played everyone. And then he shut it down. Now, when I say he shut it down, the 14 presidents of the Big Ten were the ones who voted. But the problem, and I hate to sound like a political analyst here, but the messaging was so bad. It started off with just a lame interview he gave to the Big Ten Network, which is always interesting. I'm on one of those networks where you're interviewing the guy who is a partner in your enterprise. But all he had to do was give some honest reasoning, but he didn't. He acted like a lawyer in a deposition. And then after everyone spoke up, namely Justin Fields and players and coaches like Franklin at Penn State and Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh, he then issued this manifesto on Wednesday, which, another boilerplate legalese document that meant nothing.
The interesting thing to me is, this guy is under immense pressure, and I'm not a guy, and you're not a guy who goes on and calls for people's heads. I'm not saying he should be fired, but it seems like there's not even there's no pressure on him to reconsider. We see people opting out in sports. I opt out and then I'm going to opt back in. Is he putting himself in a tough spot? Can he possibly be moved if this thing turns into a fiasco? Because let's be honest, if things don't work out for the SEC and the other conferences that are playing, people will say, see, he was right. But what happens if the other way? What happens if everything goes off without many hitches and these other conferences play, but the Big Ten kids stay at home?
Listen, I don't know what the right decision is, but I know right now he made the wrong decision. And even if he had canceled later, go through the motions. The protocols were going very well in the Big Ten. Penn State, everyone, Michigan, Ohio State, most of them were going fairly well. Just let it play out. The season wasn't set to begin for 4 weeks, so there was no reason to pull the plug other than perhaps political. And I'm not one of these conspiracy theorists. I know you're not either. But it just seems like that's where the messaging was coming from the politicians to the presidents, and he is just a puppet, and he's taking the heat. Can he afford it? Yeah, he's in the first year of a job. He followed a legend in Jim Delaney. He was there 25 years. He's not going to get fired over this, except. Let me finish my thought here, if I can. What if everything goes well? We get to the end of the season. There's a national championship, and Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, Iowa. They're all sitting at home watching. How bad could that be?
Exactly. And I'm not rooting for any. I'm not rooting for, we all want to see college football play, but we're not all just crazy enough to say, I don't care what happens to the kids. That's their job. It's not their job. But if kids are going back to school in some places, it's just one of those confusing things in a world where everything is confusing. And so I don't know what's going to happen. The Justin Fields petition, as you mentioned, a lot of these schools, you mentioned Coach Franklin at Penn State. Is there any way they can go rogue and play make their own schedules without the Big Ten sanctioning these games?
No, I really don't think there's any chance of that. And it comes down to money. Every school in the Big Ten makes about $52 million a year from the Big Ten Network and other ancillary networks. And that's a lot of money to give up just to to risk going and having a season that may not happen. And that's really the ultimate. Nothing's guaranteed here. I mean, I understand he didn't cancel the season because of a snowstorm. He canceled it because of a global pandemic, which could be one reason why everyone else gets canceled. But right now, it's just too hard to call. And if you're Penn State, you're not saying, okay, we're going to break away from the Big Ten, which we're happy to be in. We've been in it for 20 some odd years, to gamble on a season with playing a bunch of teams that nobody even knows, because right now all the conference schedules are set. You'd end up playing a bunch of nobodies, which you don't want, and there's no money to be made from it either.
Now, you mentioned the Big Ten. And then we look at the ACC, and now Notre Dame the other day, which obviously has a vested interest in playing in a conference where they get a shot to play for a national championship. Now they shut down their practice the other day because of some concern. So we're seeing some of that happen. What are your thoughts on what's going on at Notre Dame right now?
I think that's the key story. I just saw where 5 players have tested positive since the students have come back on campus. Five football players, while the students are there. Notre Dame, Tony, you can criticize them, and we all have it at times, but that's the program I would keep my eye on, because if they have serious issues there, more positive tests, more students, acting irresponsibly or acting like normal students, I should say, then you could see Father Jenkins, the president there, saying, you know what, it's not the right time, we're shutting down. And if Notre Dame shuts down, then I think it would have a domino effect. Nothing is certain right now, but Notre Dame is critical.
No, I agree. And the thing that the SEC did well, and we all can agree on this, and I'm not an SEC apologist, I'm not a Notre Dame hater or a fan. I'm pretty neutral. I'm a Temple guy, so I don't really have much to argue about other than making some minor bowl around the holiday season and being happy about it and putting some players in the NFL, which Temple always seems to do with some great coaches over the years. But you look at the SEC, the fact that they announced it late in September, isn't that the way to do it? So as we get closer and something happens, then you can say, hey, you know what, we're going to have to revisit this and do something differently.
Their schedule was supposed to start on the 5th of September. The presidents of the SEC felt like they wanted to see a couple of things. They wanted to see what happens when students showed up, which they are right now, and it's giving everybody nightmares and headaches. And they also wanted to see the NFL, which starts the second week in September. And if the NFL looks good, if students can be contained without serious outbreaks, then they'll give it a green light. Otherwise, they won't. But there was no reason why the Big Ten could not have done the same thing. And we're back to the argument of Kevin Warren with his head in the sand. It wasn't a difficult call. You're not risking anything. You're just simply saying we're delaying 3 weeks. Everyone can continue to practice because you've heard this ad nauseum. The players are safer on campus. I don't know if that's true or not. That's the line of the day. And Kevin Warren could have issued the same line. But public relations nightmare doesn't begin to describe what he is currently going through. And, especially when you had players speaking out, and you can't get a bigger player in that league or in the country than Justin Fields of Ohio State.
Meanwhile, the Pac-12 making a move. Merton Hanks, who's been around, obviously, he went to Iowa. We saw him with the 49ers win a Super Bowl, great player, Pro Bowler. And now he's been hired by Larry Scott to take some of the heat off him because, let's be honest, Larry Scott, and I lived in L.A. for 11 years and covered that conference out there. Larry Scott has been considered, well, he's a guy from the Tennis Channel who's trying to run, a major college football operation. And they finally realized we need to bring in a football guy to take some of the heat. And luckily for him, Kevin Warren took heat off the Pac-12 because we knew the Pac-12 would bail early. And so the Merton Hanks signing, I think, is a good deal because he obviously knows football. He's respected at the collegiate level and at the NFL level. So that's a good move, I think, for the Pac-12.
Yeah, he also may be the commissioner in waiting because if there's going to be a commissioner fired this year, it won't be Kevin Warren. It will be Larry Scott, who has literally driven that conference to the edge of the water in San Francisco. I mean, it's hard to find a guy who's done a worse job, which makes me feel badly when I'm criticizing Kevin Warren, somebody I actually know and respect. He's just done a bad job. But that's a key move. Somebody asked me, hey, does the SEC have one of those guys? The SEC has about 19 assistant commissioners in charge of football.
No, you're right. I saw that, and I thought the same exact thing. Larry Scott just hired his successor. Is there any doubt about that? And also one of the guys, as we remember growing up, that guy had the longest neck in the NFL when he played, Merton Hanks, in the defensive secondary for the 49ers. Not that really matters in this game at day and age, but everybody likes to talk about appearances. But I remember Merton Hanks not just as a great player, but he was a man, I believe, who had the longest neck in the National Football League.
Well,
I know. I keep track of those. That's what I think of in my warped mind when we talk about things that we remember. Of course, I remember the Niners and that dynasty and that Super Bowl they won in '95, but I remember Merton Hanks as a great player as well.
Well, Tony, he's got a great job because there's no football for the next couple of months, and then he can act like they're having spring football out there, which they won't because nobody wants to see spring football. I've covered a million leagues, and I'm sure you have too. Professional leagues have all failed, so he's in for he's got a good 4 or 5 months he can move, and without any serious demand to get to work on time.
Yeah, it's a good job if you can have it. Meanwhile, I started my new job here at SiriusXM and all the other things that I'm doing when the pandemic started. So, I guess we must be considered essential people. You are, Paul, at the SEC and at ESPN, and I guess I am too, because just like the people out there, and I'm not comparing myself to grocery store workers and people who have to go and climb up light poles to fix after major storms, but we're doing stuff. We're doing our job. We're trying to keep people entertained and informed, and we all want to see sports, and sports is coming back. So that's the only thing I care about. I like the fact that we're seeing basketball, we're seeing hockey, we're seeing baseball, we're seeing other sports starting to get back in business, and hopefully college football does. And if they don't, I'm not going to lose my job because I got a job when there weren't any sports to talk about.
No, I feel the same way. I mean, it's so interesting that the debate from the critics out there that a number of people don't want football, a number of people do. I'm talking about college football. I have a job for a short period of time without college football? Yes, maybe not long term, but guys like us who have had various jobs, you don't worry about stuff like that. You show up for work, you do the show. And if there's a game, fine. If there's not, it can often be more interesting.
And then we can always pick on Peter Burns, one of my good buddies from way back in the day from San Antonio, doing a great job as well with the SEC coverage and ESPN. Hey, Paul, it's an honor to talk to you. Really appreciate the time today. Thanks for the insights.
Tony, it has been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I can't.
Harry left early. So for those